Grimer.
Yeah, that's right, Jeremy. There are actually multiple Alolan Grimers you could play. Alolan Grimer lets you evolve up to Alolan Muck. That's the main Pokemon. Its Power of Alchemy ability lets you shut off all basic Pokemon's abilities, and so it's a very effective, very useful tool against most decks. Not necessarily Greninja as much because he doesn't have as many abilities on basic Pokemon, does he?
Uh, One Tapu play decks. They really played that. Added deck does have a struggle trying to set up sometimes.
Yeah.
Kind of. Uh,
Sure, well, generally there are two different types of Greninja decks. There are Greninja decks that run a Pokemon called Talonflame from one of the more recent sets. It's a very weird Stage 2 Pokemon where if you open with it in your hand, normally you can't play Pokemon that are evolutions directly into play, but if you start with it in your opening hand, you can put it down as your active Pokemon. So effectively that makes it like a basic, but it looks like Andrew's got some pretty exciting stuff going on here. He's getting his full setup.
yeah, Ultra Ball for that turn multiples in play, and while but Frogadier.
Exactly. Now, the other type of version of Greninja you might see is what Sam's playing, where he isn't using anything really fancy. He isn't automatically putting big stage twos into play on the very first turn of the game. Instead, he's relying his main starting Pokemon, Froakie itself. And so he doesn't necessarily run any ways to evolve that Froakie past the
Oh
first
no,
turn.
it looks like nothing
He's
but
got
a
a
bubble.
bubble. Oh my gosh, now this is exactly what
This
you're
is
talking
game.
about.
Wow.
Yeah, that's exactly what you were talking about. This deck runs really hot, it runs really cold, and right now it looked like this was kind of an ice-type Pokemon here because that was freezing cold.
Yeah, even with Tails on the bubble to not even give him any sort of chance that game one. Andrew, of course, had the Zoroark GX and the
Yeah,
double colorless to steal game one right from under Sam.
exactly. But you know what? Sam isn't out of this at all. He is running a deck that doesn't necessarily rely on an explosive first turn. He isn't even getting that Frogadier into play on the first turn. But once he does, he can use the Water Duplicate's attack to get multiple Frogadier into play. So you remember the theme from earlier where the other variant of the deck we were talking about lets you put a Stage 2 into play as if it were an unevolved basic Pokemon. Well, that's the same idea with Frogadier's Water Duplicate's attack. It's a Stage 1, you attach a Water Energy to it, use Water Duplicates, and you get to put Stage 1 Pokemon into play as if they were unevolved basics.
Yeah, no, things were candy, right? Like
Yeah.
that's how you cheat these play. But Zero, it's really just yeah, I'm gonna use this water duplicate attack, and then next turn evolve into a ninja and try to see what you can do. But so fragile if you prize a couple
Frogadier, do anything like that.
Yeah, and there are some players of this Greninja deck who have tried to find ways to get around that. They've run, like you said, Jeremy, the rare candy item card lets you evolve a basic Pokemon that's been in play for one turn directly into a Stage 2. So you do get that chance to cheat your way, as you will, into that Stage 2 evolution. But, I mean, that's the great thing about the deck, is it allows you to do all sorts of things that are 100% allowed. They are absolutely great plays that you can make, but the problem is that you have to get to that point. You have to be able to get out of that lone Froakie, or in this case, a lone Staryu.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there's a couple Staryus with 40 HP. This might be one of them, and that might be a little scary.
Yeah.
But he does get that Brooklet Hill in play. Brooklet Hill searching his deck for any water or fighting Pokemon, but there's only water Pokemon here.
Yeah. Well, other than the Tapu Lele, but you only want to play the Tapu Lele from your hand, so that's a little bit different. Brooklet Hill, I like this turn. I think it's an incredible chance to set up well, especially if that Brooklet Hill stays for an extra turn, because in case Sam might be threatened of maybe losing his Froakie on the first turn, he could get another one later, but this lets him get a card, get another card later, in case he wants to build up his setup a little bit more. So the most important thing, though, is that first Froakie, which has now hit the board.
Yeah, exactly. And with Greninja, it's a deck that really doesn't do anything the first two turns.
Right.
So you kind of are inherently at a disadvantage, especially to a deck just so fast like Zoroark. Like, oh, I get a Bridget in play. Of course, I'm going to get multiple Zoroark in play next turn, and then what are you going to do?
Yeah, now there are a couple other cards you could do to maybe get around that. Well, we've already talked about a couple of them. We talked about Rare Candy, but there's also the Wally supporter card from Primal Clash and Generations, which lets you automatically evolve a Pokemon that's a basic, or Stage 1. Any rate, you just evolve straight from your deck to the Pokemon.
Yeah, unfortunately for Sam, he does not play any copies of that, and thanks to Sam's Brooklet Hill, Andrew gets the Sudowoodo from his deck for free. He had to do nothing, and he's like, okay, I'll get this.
Oh my gosh.
And we actually see a Field Blower in his hand too. If he chooses to, he could get rid of the Brooklet Hill.
You were a psychic. You were a psychic, Jeremy. That Brooklet Hill went away right now, and it looks like he's doing a bit of damage, but he's not getting the knockout.
Wow, and there's no Zora in play either. No supporter from Andrew there on his first turn. And here we see Starmie coming down from Sam, and a Frogadier as well.
Wow.
Does he have the energy to water duplicates?
Yeah, and there we go. Now, the thing that I might like about Sam's play, this might be a little bit of speculation, but I think that he had that water energy in his hand, but I think that he chose to hold on to that water energy because he knew that there was a chance that Andrew could score that knockout with the Tapu Lele.
Yeah, exactly. It's such smart play from Sam here. No wonder why he's doing so well in this tournament this weekend. And unfortunately, Water Duplicates only gets 2 Frogadier, meaning 1 is prized. Now, thankfully, he does play a Gladion to try to get it, but it's a little bit too slow right now.
Yeah, and I think especially for the way that Sam's setup has worked with Roadblock coming into play on Andrew's side, this isn't too bad. If I were a Greninja player, I would want to have as many Frogadier as I could, even if I meant that my bench was a little clogged, because remember, Roadblock reduces your opponent's bench size down to 4, no matter what else isn't in play, just about reduces it down to 4, so there's a single spot left. Now, if he got the 3rd Frogadier, he might have a complete board ready to evolve, but if he needs to get a supporter with like Tapu Lele and his Wonder Tag, his bench would be full and he couldn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking about how bad Andrew's turn 1 was. He top decked the Tapu Lele GX, his second copy, to get that Bridget. Now he has 3 Zorua in play, and next turn he can start trading.
Yeah, and you know, one thing that if we're in Sam's shoes, I wish I had a little bit differently was instead of having that water energy, a splash energy.
Yeah, that's one card that has been a staple in Greninja for so long. Being able just to pick up your guys if they get knocked out.
I know, right? I mean, it's a big deal, especially when you're trying to chain a bunch of these Pokemon, because as you'll see in Sam's game plan, it's important to have not just one Greninja in play, but multiple Greninjas.
Yeah, and there we see Sam dive ball for the Greninja, Ultra Ball discarding a Bursting Balloon, which is a card that we haven't seen in a while.
We haven't seen that card until the deck first came out, have we?
Yeah, and I think it's such a good card in this metagame right now. It allows you to hit numbers perfectly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. So when it comes to Bursting Balloon, it is a tool from one of the more recent sets from Breakpoint where you attach it to the Pokemon. Pokemon is damaged by an attack. You get to put 6 free damage counters on the Pokemon that just attacked you. So take a look at the math on Greninja's attacks. You have one attack that does 40, one attack that does 60, or 80 if you bring water energy back to your hand. So you're doing some pretty good math if you put the Bursting Balloon on at the right time.
And there is Starmie's Space Beacon ability, I believe, where he discards a card from his hand, gets up to 2 energy from his discard pile back to his hand, and that means he's just going to be able to keep rolling these Greninjas, and a Bursting Balloon even comes down, even more assurance to these Zoroark GXs that are for sure coming down from Andrew. And as we see 2 of them.
Right, now Andrew's turn is going to look a lot busier than Sam's, even though Sam's going to be relying on a lot of combinations of cards. He is going to be using the trade ability you've seen so much this weekend. Lets you discard a card, draw 2. You get to use multiples depending on whether or not you have more Zoroark GXs in play. That's 1 per Zoroark GX. So Andrew can basically be drawing himself a new hand every single turn, assuming that he can use abilities still.
Exactly. We do see the Guzma come down from Andrew, bringing up that Starmie, a card that really just helps him always keep energy, but there's no energy from Andrew here.
Yeah, and he just passed that last turn.
Yeah, because Shadow Stitching.
Yeah, because of Shadow Stitching, locking abilities.
Such a powerful attack.
Oh, and he dropped the Greninja Break. He got the Greninja Break out. That's awesome. Now, Greninja Break is a very important card in this combination. The idea behind the deck, in addition to putting free damage on the board with Bursting Balloon, you're also putting free damage on the board with the Giant Water Shuriken ability. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, Water Shuriken, you only are able to use it when it's active, but discarding a Water, especially in combination with Starmie's ability, it's really just free 60 damage anywhere almost every turn.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I think with the math involved in this deck, where the Zoruas have 60 HP, Sam runs Espeon EX in his list to de-evolve Pokemon, so from Sam's perspective, he's setting up a bunch of knockouts.
And
later
there
on
is another Greninja Break hitting the table.
Wow.
There we see a retreat from the Starmie, and he is in full setup mode right now. There is a Giant Water Shuriken on the Zorua. That's a free prize.
Absolutely, and you know what? As long as you get set up with this deck, Zoroark matchup can just be golden at that point, where you can make laps around your opponent without too much trouble.
Yeah, there we see another Shadow Stitching, shutting off that trade ability for Andrew. And when he just passed last turn, I don't know if he has much this turn as well.
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, missing that knockout on the Starmie was huge because of Space Beacon, the ability on Starmie. You discard a card from your hand, you get to water back. It's kind of like trade, but not as good, but in some ways it's better for Greninja because you get to cycle your water energy almost infinitely.
And here we see a Versus Seeker for a Guzma, definitely one of those desperation plays.
Yeah.
And even though he won't be able to take the knockout here, it's what he has to do.
Yeah. Although he still has that Space Beacon ability, so it's...
Yeah.
There we go.
And even fueling Space Beacon more by discarding a basic water to retreat. And there is Greninja Break back to the active. That means another 60 damage will come down thanks to Space Beacon.
That's right. Now, I kind of like the desperation play that Andrew's been making here by bringing up that Starmie, hoping that he can kind of break the strength of the chain of what Sam's doing, because you get to use one Giant Water Shuriken per Greninja Break that you have in play. So Sam's dropped not just one, but 2 Greninja Breaks. So at this point, he can use those, get 120 free damage on the board, multiple different combinations.
Yeah, Greninja has free retreat.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, and there comes the Hex Maniac.
Alright, this will help Andrew a little bit, but still, he doesn't have anything else attacker-wise. He's poking with this Tapu Lele, just energy drive for 60 every turn.
You're right, and the sad thing here is that if things were just a little bit different, if he ran another tool option, say like Muscle Band from one of the earlier sets, since it adds 20 damage to each attack you're doing, at that point, he would have much better math right here, but I understand that most players here competing with GXs and EXs, so Choice Band plus 30 damage only to GXs and EXs is generally a better play. Not so much for this Greninja matchup.
Yeah, that's also the strength of Greninja, with the only 2 prize Pokemon in his deck is Espeon and Tapu Lele, so you're really making your opponent take every knockout they have to.
I know, right? But the nice thing for Sam is that in his shoes, he isn't forced to put himself in a situation where he is letting his opponent draw too many prizes too early, because he can hold off on that Espeon EX until the very end of the game. That is usually a game winner when you use it, because you can devolve multiple Pokemon in play. You evolve all of your opponent's evolution Pokemon.
And there we see a concession from Andrew. The Shadow Stitching barrage was too much for Zoroark to handle.
So it looks like that comeback might be real. It just depends on whether Sam gets a setup like that, or if in the first game he has not so much of a setup, right?
Yeah, first game wasn't really good for him, but that's the one problem with Greninja, is just sometimes you get hands like that.
Yeah, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you get 2 Greninja Breaks on the board, and sometimes you bubble.
Yeah, it is very big to point out that since it's Game 3 and Sam won Game 2, Andrew does get to go first, meaning he will have access to abilities for a couple turns before Greninja could get online.
Yeah. Now for this game 3, things are a little bit different because in a lot of our matches throughout the weekend, you might have noticed a little bit of nervousness when it comes to time, where with time situations, you might end up with like 15 minutes left, if even that, but both of these players have won their respective games very quickly, so presumably they've got a lot of time on the board.
Yeah, no need to rush here. Always think about your moves to the best of your ability, and always trying to make sure what's prized, especially for Greninja. You're like, okay, please don't prize any Frogadiers. I'll be fine. Let's just draw some basic Pokemon. Brooklet Hill.
Awesome. So it looks like they're not shoveled up and ready to start.
And yet, with a win here, the person will be at 30 match points, meaning they would only need a win and potentially a couple ties to make it into top 8.
Yeah.
So this is a very important game.
Oh, it's super important because in a long tournament like this, like we were just talking about at the very beginning, this is 9 rounds on the first day, multiple games in each of those rounds, 6 rounds on the second day, 15 rounds total. Maybe you could be playing as many as 45 games in a single weekend.
There we see the Staryu start again from Sam. And Andrew has that Gets card, a card that's definitely made expanded, kind of just warped into its thing. And
I think I see a supporter at the very end of that. I'm not
but
sure.
No,
is it a playable
it's an Ace Trainer, I believe.
Oh my gosh! Now Ace Trainer is a very useful utility draw card in this deck, but you cannot play that Ace Trainer unless you're behind on prizes. Otherwise, it's just dead weight in your hand. You can't do anything with it.
And Andrew's hand is stocked full of good cards. He has plenty of Pokemon, a Tapu Lele for supporter next turn if he chooses, and unless Sam draws something here. No, it looks like a Versus Seeker.
Yeah, it looks like it.
With Staryu's only having 40 HP, can we see a repeat of what happened game 1?
I think that might be a possibility unless there's something in his hand we don't even see.
There we see a pass. There's not even a chance to bubble.
But
it's all on Andrew. He needs to find a double colorless and a Zoroark. That's all he needs right now.
He might be able to fight it with that Tapu Lele because with Wonder Tag, he'll be able to get a supporter card, maybe let himself draw some more cards. The main way people usually draw cards in either format is to use a supporter card to do so. One of the main ways to do it in both formats is Professor Sycamore or Professor Juniper. Discard your whole hand, draw 7 cards.
And looking at his hand, it looks like maybe his Sycamore was prized, because these decks really only play like 1 or 2. Actually, looks like he doesn't play a Sycamore.
I think you're right. It looks like it. And that's the thing about some of these Zoroark decks is that they typically rely on having a bunch of benched Pokemon. So there are cards that are more resource friendly. The scary thing about discarding your whole hand is you might lose something important. So by running the Colress supporter card, you shuffle your hand back in, draw up to the number of benched Pokemon on both sides. You could be drawing more cards, and you could be protecting your resources.
Alright, so this is best case scenario for you Greninja fans. Because only 6 cards, it's a lot less likely, but
wait.
There's an Ultra Ball, there's a double colorless.
And it looks like a basic in his hand, am I wrong?
He doesn't need the basic. Zoroark does
you're
40,
right, it's 40. Yeah, it's even smaller and punier than a little Froakie, so...
And there we see the double colorless.
Wow.
And that is 2 quick games for Andrew out of this best of 3. And wow, unfortunately for Sam, those opening hands game 1 and 3 did not turn out right.
No, and sometimes that's just the way it deals out. I mean, that's how Pokemon works, where you're shuffling up. Sometimes you get bad luck. Sometimes the probabilities don't work in your favor. And it seems like that was the case in Sam's deck, where even though it seems like he probably would have had a normally good matchup against that deck, it just didn't feel out right to him.
Game 2, he was very far ahead. Shadow Stitching puts a lot of work on Zoroark GX. Not being able to use trade is something that the deck really relies on, so it just didn't work out for him. But being able to steal 2 games essentially, wow.
Yeah, and had that setup happened another time, like in the second game, then the result would have been completely different. But sometimes you get Staryu and other Pokemon in play, and sometimes you just get Staryu.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will be back shortly with a winner's interview with Andrew.